Spencer, appreciate your time, bro. Before we get into everything that you're doing now, looking back on your younger days, how did you think about purpose and life after basketball? Was, creating opportunities for yourself for life after the game always something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was always something in the back of my mind. Like I didn't anticipate, having a chance at the NBA until about halfway through my college career. So it was always, the main thing was to use basketball to get to a good school, and I did that to at with Stanford, and then yeah, halfway through it was kind of like, all right, you got opportunity for this. Why wouldn't you take it? Obviously, it was a dream through the whole time, but no, it was always education was always the first thing that came. I thank my parents for that, and it was funny. We actually, despite being recruited in high school to like a bunch of schools, they still made me take the Common App, figure out kind of like what baseline in terms of what kind of schools my grades could get me into, and then we would only use basketball if it was at the same level or above, and so it was always something in the back of my mind, from early on.
Yeah, and obviously, the pedigree of Stanford academically is up there with the best universities in this country, man. Like, how do you think that has shaped the way you think, on and off the court and how you approach challenges?
Yeah. I mean, one thing is like, I mean, places like that just gives you perspective. I mean, I feel like, growing up and everything like that, like, you feel like how are the ways to make a boatload of money, and you just think like maybe being a CEO of a company and then like, sports and stuff like that. You go to a place like Stanford, you see how many people are so successful in so many different avenues and kind of opens your eyes to like, how many ways there are to be successful and really opens your curiosity. But yeah, from the problem solving area, like I will credit a lot of things I've learned from Stanford, both to like helping and maybe making it basketball a little bit harder at times, but taking into the engineering approach of kind of like knowing, with how analytical basketball is, kind of taking the approach of really like knowing my role recognition, and knowing kind of like the stats and where like 90% of my shots come from, and really owning on. It's really helped me to own on the skills that I do have and maximizing them to get on the floor, stay on the floor, and stay consistent. And then the part that kind of hinders me a little bit is maybe get a little bit too far into the numbers, and you miss a couple of shots like, shoot, now I'm at like 30 something percent instead of 40% from three, and that can definitely hurt if you think too much about it. But it's definitely having that has certainly helped me through my career.
Yeah, you mentioned how your parents kind of helped shape you academically and really pushed you in that direction. When it comes to investing and getting into technology, did you have any like mentors or people that you consider to be, an influence in that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a bunch, still collecting a lot. I remember my like initial one to get me into investing and just thinking about all the opportunities within it was Bruce Dunleavy, who's a partner at Benchmark Capital, and he's infamous for a lot of the investments he made during the dot-com boom and a lot of those tech companies and everything like that. And he definitely, is somebody I still talk to. Actually called last week, just in terms of like when I have much more of those bigger investments, thinking about it, like when I initially got a lot of this money, how to think about investing, and his opinions on the economy and stuff like that. I have a really good mentor now in Denver, Bill Powell, who helps me a lot with evaluating a lot of sports tech, because he's sports tech, health and wellness, human performance tech, because that's primarily what his fund, Anthropy Partners, works in. And he's been great at helping me like evaluate the stuff that comes across my desk, what's really, what can really push through and stuff like that. And then there's been a lot of people along the way through it, whether on the court, off the court, and stuff like that. But those are the two main guys, that I definitely think too that they kind of push me a lot into what I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I want to get into what you're doing on LinkedIn because I've been seeing a lot of articles covering like athletes posting on LinkedIn, and you're at the top of that list often these days, man. And your consistency and the value that you're providing on the platform. So, obviously most athletes aren't doing that. They're not, talking about technology and how it intersects with what they're doing on the playing field. Why did you start posting on LinkedIn, and how has that platform benefited you professionally?
Yeah, I mean, initially it's kind of funny. I never intended for it to kind of blow up like it has or get the recognition it has. I never expected it to. The initial reason was simply just to keep in touch with the network I had at Stanford and the people and alumni I connected to, because everybody talks about that's the real value of a going to a place like that. Beyond other stuff, but that's a lot of what makes the decision a 40-year decision. And so I knew I was going to play professionally for at least 4 or 5 years. And so it was just the easiest way to do it without individually having to text people, keep a presence of mind, and then kind of stay into a little bit up to date in terms of the tech space and, the startup space and everything that I loved in Silicon Valley. And so, yeah, I just started doing that, writing a couple articles and, a couple of them uh, blew up a little bit. And I saw how much the network was just personally growing. And then too, like how many deals, although like, I'd still say about 70% of them are a little, and not quite the caliber, but still like it's still like the amount of deal flow I would get coming into LinkedIn, and then the amount of just like venture funds I'd run into, other people in venture capital, other people doing kind of what I'm doing and like I just saw like, how much of whether those were second degree connections or not kept helping me out in terms of figuring out, how I want to structure my portfolio and everything like that. And so, I mean, it's really helped with one, like, yes, the direct deal flow into LinkedIn isn't great, but like the secondary of it to where like, you connect with the people who run certain funds that are legitimate and stuff like that. And then now that deal flow, which, more comes through my email. But for them, like it's now to where like, when I originally started thinking about doing venture investing, I always imagined like I'd be doing it through syndicates, through funds, because I mean, I knew I came in knowing a decent amount about it, but it's one thing to know it and then be super confident to like going in on your own. But what gave me that confidence was obviously one, having, those mentors from Stanford and stuff like that to give me great diligence and know a lot about the space. But then two, just the network I got from LinkedIn in terms of like, building that out with great partners who work at great firms and getting like deal flow that's already kind of pre-vetted through them, really made me realize like, like I don't need to pay this two and 20 fees
Yeah.
and can kind of go on my own on my terms and kind of, use the brand of NBA and, this Stanford guy who's also investing and stuff like that and all those connections to be more of a strategic investor and get better terms on a lot of deals. And so that's kind of how I've done it, is kind of going in mostly on my own with a lot of these deals. And, it's been great. And then now it's been nice that the NBA's grabbed a big hold of it to where they'll invite me out to certain things. Like this summer, I did the NBA Sanctuary, where they have a lot of their sports tech companies come out and talk about the kind of innovations they're going during All-Star week. I did a panel with the NBA Launchpad, and obviously, I get invited to the NBA Tech Summit every year, and so like getting the connections with the NBA now and having that kind of back supporting me only kind of brings more and more leverage as an investor. And so it's been great how and surprising how quickly that's all kind of been building.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of alluded to like the type of opportunities that you're most interested in around like sports tech, health and wellness. Are there any like specific themes or patterns that you look for when you're evaluating opportunities in those sectors?
Yeah, I mean, I started a lot in the health and wellness sports tech, obviously, because it was brand aligned and everything like that. But I really only touch stuff that can at least, especially within sports tech, that can at least hit the youth market or hit at least the general consumer. And tech's my main stuff just because coming from an engineer, I can validate the science behind it, see how sticky it is. But what really helps me is a lot, and this has been fun, is with now integrating kind of the stuff I'm looking at with with my strength staff and training staff, because then they're the ones who are like, because everybody says they have partnerships with teams and stuff like that, but how sticky are those? Like, how real is that? They kind of help me kind of establish that, kind of knowing the ecosystem in terms of, is a team just partnering with this to try it out for a couple of weeks, or are they like, this is something we want to revolve ourselves around, get some data on, and really establish it? Because a lot of and a lot of ones that eventually hit the consumer and youth market typically use the high profile of sports and that data to validate the product. And so you kind of get I use a lot of their opinions to get that kind of edge in terms of like, all right, is this a real mover in the space, or is this just like kind of another little gimmick that might look nice for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, man, no, for sure. And then, for a founder who might be listening to this, you mentioned like, or kind of alluded to it slightly of like a lot of the deals that you make that may come across your table might not be the best. So if a founder is looking to raise capital, wants to get you on their cap table, how can they cut through the noise? Like, what do you like to see in maybe a pitch or email that uh will pique your interest or at least get you in terms of like wanting to possibly take a meeting with that founder?
Yeah, like one, like I always like have like the pitch deck or whatever ready. Like I'm because I'm, I have plenty of time and I'm not gonna want to get on a call before looking at a deck, like especially during season. A lot of people reach out like with the idea, but like with nothing substantial attached to that message. And it's like then I gotta like I said, I'm strapped on time, and I'm curious enough to go and look at it. But if I'm strapped to time, I might not just because like all right, I don't have time to go sift through and try to figure out what the company is, and I'm not gonna jump on a call without any sort of input. I mean, the worst thing is to go on a call and then midway through you're like, all right, this was a waste of time.
Yeah.
I could have been doing something else. That's a big one. And then for me, like a lot of, like I said, I'm a big science guy. So I like, because half of my diligence, especially within this health and wellness and sports tech stuff, is like figuring out, all right, like how much are you really moving the needle, and like what is the science backed behind it? Why, what makes it better than your competitors and stuff like that. So just having the science readily and available, and even if it's in a long paper or whatever like that, just showing me that it's already like you've already like done through it and gone through a lot of that stuff to show that how viable your product is. And then, other than that, keeping it pretty concise is possible. Like if I want to hear your story, I'll get on the call. Like right now, this is about like, all right, who are you as a founder? And what differentiates your product? And those are the two things I'm trying to get out of that first message. Everything else, I'll get, I'll get in the meeting. But like that's why I feel like 60% of the stuff, especially early stage, you look at, you're really just betting, all right, what's the history of this founder and what's the differentiator of this product? And also maybe like what's the market size? And those are the three things that you're like, all right, then now this is worth really digging into. And so those are kind of the big things I kind of look for when I'm approached by some new companies.
Yeah, for sure. And get it back to your LinkedIn content, man. I think one of the things that people appreciate and also what makes you stand out is that you tie a lot of like what you're doing on the court to the business world. And it's very specific, it's very nuanced. So when you think about like this dualism of careers, like you're actively investing, but you're also a high level professional athlete, like what are some of the overlaps between the two things that you're doing, like some of the takeaways or lessons that can apply to both fields?
Yeah. The big thing is, especially this year, obviously, I got my two-way converter, but like working through uncertainty and like how to figure out, like I know the skills that I've had to build through it, but now kind of vetting that through other founders and kind of the kind of mentalities they have and kind of working through that on uncertainty that parallels very well. And I've seen it. Dealing with egos is certainly something like I definitely felt that a little bit at Stanford, where it's like like even obviously NBA's guys on teams have their own egos, and that's really what, I mean, shoot, the kind of front office kind of transition we had last year had a little bit to do with egos and stuff like that. And so you can see how that can really transition into stuff. And that's a big one with some founders that I try to gauge, especially if they're early stage. Like, do they understand like how hard this is going to be and everything like that. And then, beyond that, like there's a bunch of other like little stuff. Those I'd say those are like the two main that I really think about.
And going back, like looking back at your past self, maybe like when you were first coming into the league, like what's one piece of career advice you would have given your younger self or wish you would have known when you were starting out on this path?
On this path, just like the investing side, or
Yeah,
just all
yeah, from the investing side specifically.
from the investing side, like the biggest thing was I could have learned quicker the value I had as an investor and knowing to push for better terms really early on as much as you can. I mean, a lot of these, because I mean, a lot of everyone, like just like how, a basketball player may like over talk about like how their career went, like a lot of founders are gonna over talk how much money they raised really, and like how much, the valuations even might be a little bit high. And, a lot of that is the selling point of a lot of things. And so, you get kind of strapped up into those things and be like, oh my God, this company's, valuation's like a 100 million or whatever. I'd be so lucky just to get on here or whatever. And, but like having a little bit more, maybe a little more confidence to bring, to ask those deep questions and really try to drive their minimums down to get me in at something or those terms to better allocate to myself. And then second thing I would be is really look at the boring stuff. I like. a lot of people talk about why athletes go broke with their investments. A lot of it is just because like they're so used to being in the limelight and everything like that. And so you feel like because I'm an NBA investor, the companies I have to be attached to have to also be as interesting as people already are in me. And so a lot of the companies I was looking at initially, they were just ones that, you'd see all the time on YC, or you just see published on all these different sites. You'd see have them have high marketing spends, and so they just be present, presence. And so I think taking, and that's a lot of the ego of it, is taking the ego out of like wanting to be in the spotlight and wanting to be like, oh my God, he's attached to this company that's I hear so much about. Wow, that must be a great deal. And like there's some offers I've had where I've almost jumped at despite having pretty bad terms, because it was these weren't the companies, but because it was like a SpaceX, Anthropic, or one of those big names that you want to be attached to, because then you'll it'll immediately raise some eyebrows. But a lot of this stuff, especially now that I try to look at a lot. If it is within AI, it's a lot of that back infrastructure stuff. Half people, 99% of people don't
Right.
understand, but it's really moving the needle and could really, really can offer you better terms, stuff like that. And that's also where I'm thinking like, look, if you can bring more notoriety to companies like that, it makes you even more of a strategic investor, and you really have more of a push on the cap table versus one that's already been seen by kind of everybody.
Yeah, no, that's really solid insight, man. Last few questions before we wrap up. When you think about success, how do you define that at this stage in your life? Obviously you just got the contract and you're doing a lot of things on the tech investing side, but like what is success actually equal for you?
Um, I forget the exact quote, but like I just remember a quote of being like truly the smartest person in the room or the most successful person in the room is like just building the life you want to live. And like like a lot is like, especially even now, like, you feel like, yeah, despite, you know, you're always pushing the needle no matter how much, success you have. So like, like I got the two-way contract, or I got the regular contract. Well, now like, naturally the needle moves to, all right, let's get to be even more premier of a starter, get my stats up. And then from then, let's go be an all-star. From then, let's win a championship. Like the needle's always going to get moved there, despite like in the view of 99% of people, I'm already successful. So for me, success would be obviously, getting to a point where I get the respect and notoriety within the investment community, within the NBA community, and obviously build myself financially around to not, obviously have the ability to do whatever I want with my life, but then expand this community to not have me be a rare case anymore in terms of a guy that's posting on LinkedIn and starting on, this illiquid asset class so early in his career and venture that, most athletes don't do. And, think about making, very smart, strategic and long-term plays with their money, and really building, things without, really building their career, really building a secondary career while still in their first one, and not have that be a unique thing. And I guess success would be building a platform, community, or space that really, helps other people, do the same things I've done and improve on it. So
Mhm. I appreciate it, man. And lastly, um, God willing, you have a long, successful NBA career. But when it's all said and done, man, what do you want people to say about how you approached your career in your life, like your
yeah,
legacy that you want to leave behind?
yeah, I want people to think that like, I really took down a lot of the pillars of the stereotypes of traditional athletes, and a lot of that of being, not being, not always being so forward thinking, not always making the smartest decisions, and, kind of wasting money and stuff like that, like kind of, being back in the forefront and giving a new view into kind of like, look, yeah, we're athletes who spend a lot of time in our sports, but we have built up a lot of skills and a lot of things that can traverse in a lot of different industries. And, to have people think of me being as somewhat of a catalyst for that would be amazing.
Spencer, appreciate your time, man. I know what you're going to say here, but if people want to connect with you, where can they find out? Where you hanging out the most, and where can they learn more about
Yeah,
what you're
man.
doing?
LinkedIn's the best way. LinkedIn's the best way.
All right, brother, man. Appreciate your time. This is great.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.